Good evening, everyone.
So we can start. This is the last talk of the symposium. We have completed this 2 day event very nicely. Tomorrow is actually our foundation day. It's on 28th September. After the 6 talks today, we will always hope that in future we can organize more events. So without wasting much time, so we'll start the last talk for the session today. I'll ask Ananda Krishna to introduce the speaker for the day.
Welcome everybody to today's last talk for the session. Our last speaker in the session is Sunil Kumar Pashupati, who is a PhD student at the School of Mathematics under the guidance of Dr. Sri Lakshmi Krishnamurthy. Sunil currently works in areas of algebraic number theory and has recently working with his advisor in problems related to Euclidean ideals and class numbers. Sunil has joined us the club as a coordinator recently and has been helping out with various things. His talk for today is titled A Walk Through the Irreducibility of Polynomials in Light of Newton Polygon, where he will speak about the Newton Polygon methods for irreducibility. Over to him.
Thank you, Anand Krishna, for the introduction. And I would like to thank Math Club for giving me opportunity to talk here. I'll be talking on irreducibility of polynomials, but I'll be using a Newton polygon method to prove some irreducibility criteria. So, as my title suggests, so we'll be going through irreducibility of polynomials, and we'll be using some results from Newton polygon method. So, we should know what is the irreducibility of polynomial and the Newton polygon. We should understand these two words first. This is going to be fundamental. I mean, it is going to be a bit simple, not going to be research level talk. So, if you are bored, please ask questions so that you will not be bored. Okay.
In case anyone has any questions, feel free to put them up in the chat or maybe unmute yourself and ask the questions.
So that is a better way of entertaining yourself, asking questions. Yeah. So my talk will be this way. So first I will be introducing what is irreducibility of polynomials is, and then I will be talking about few irreducibility criteria that we must have seen in our course, abstract algebra course. Then I will introduce what discrete valuations are. I give some examples and stuff. Then later I'll be talking about Newton polygon method. And using Newton polygon method, I'll prove the Eisenstein criteria, which we all know, but I'll give a different proof. And at last, though the coherence criteria is no connection with the Newton polygon, I thought of introducing it because it really gives a really good criteria for determining polynomial to be irreducible. And the Ramotis criteria is actually a generalized version of coherence. And at the end, I'll be talking about some questions which are really interesting to think about. So look at the definition of irreducibility of polynomials. Okay. So here, if R is a ring, the polynomial is said to be irreducible polynomial. Said to be reducible whenever you write them as a product of two polynomials which are not constant. So a constant polynomial is irreducible if it is not reducible. For example, if I write x, I hope I don't need to give an example here. Later on. So let L over K be a field extension. Suppose f is a polynomial in K of x, and f is irreducible over L, then f is also irreducible over K. Because if f is reducible over K, then you write them as a product. The same product is also, we have it over L, so that is not possible. So in case, even if I replace this K by any ring, for suppose I have Z contained in Q, right? So if I take any polynomial over Z, if it is irreducible over Q, it should be irreducible over Z. But it may not be the other way around. For example, any L over K, for example, if I take my L to be Q root 2 and K to be Q, so if I take x square plus 2 is my polynomial, it is irreducible over K, that means Q, but it is not irreducible over L, because it factors into x minus root 2 and x plus root 2. Okay. So, but there is a Gauss lemma which says, so it is irreducible over one thing, if and only if it is irreducible over other thing. That means, so if it is, I take it, but there is some constraint on the polynomial. So if I take a polynomial over Z of x, that is irreducible over Z of x, if and only if it is irreducible in Q of x. But the polynomial has to be primitive polynomial. Primitive means if you take GCD of all the coefficients of polynomial, it should be 1. That's all I require. So that is why the Gauss lemma is something that, and I can actually replace that by any UFD and Q by that fraction field of that UFD. That is still true, but I just wanted to show that the irreducibility of R contained in L, that still the irreducibility of R can imply irreducibility of L. So I just put the Gauss lemma here. Okay. So one of the basic irreducibility criteria is we use the mod P test, whereas if given a polynomial over Z of X, you go mod P, look at a polynomial, see if it is irreducible. Okay. So somehow working with finite fields is easy. So they go mod P, you see whether the polynomial is irreducible, and also you have to make sure another condition, that is whether the polynomial and reduction, the polynomial after reduction, do they have the same degree? In case they have the same degree, then you say it is irreducible over Z. So for example, maybe just to understand, I take this polynomial. So you go mod P, I take it to be 2. So then the polynomial becomes x cubed plus x plus 1. And degree of f dash is the same as degree of f. And also one thing to observe is that we know that whenever I have a cubic polynomial, the polynomial with degree less than or equal to 3, okay, it is reducible if and only if it has a root. So, but it is easy to check that it doesn't have a root, and it will be irreducible over Z. Z mod 2 Z. So it should be irreducible over Z. That's how it is. Okay. So here also you can actually talk in generality, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Okay. So Eisenstein criteria. So this is something everybody likes it. Okay. So the statement is this. So you have a polynomial of n degree n, such that there exists a prime number P such that it satisfies 3 conditions. First condition is it divides all coefficients except the leading coefficient, and then P doesn't divide the leading coefficient, and P squared doesn't divide the A naught. Then what you have is you will have that F is irreducible. So for example, if I take this polynomial and choose choose P to be 5, then P divides all the coefficients except the leading coefficient, and P squared, that is 25, cannot divide the 5, so it satisfies Eisenstein criteria. I can conclude. So I have put one more example where you can switch the polynomial and use the Eisenstein criteria. Here it is.
Was that enough for a proof of the mod P criterion?
No. Yeah. These criteria I'm not going to prove them. This is just to show that these are the criteria. I'm not giving the proof of any of this here. But I'm saying the statement is this. If you have any problem with the statement, I can clarify. But proof I'm not giving yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So now other example is this. I just wanted to put it. It will be fun. So I can't directly use the Eisenstein criteria. But what I can do is I can transform it a bit and use the Eisenstein criteria. So here we also know that if you take a Q of X to Q of X, the map that takes X to X plus 1 is actually isomorphism between these rings, and F is irreducible if and only if F of X plus 1 is irreducible. So what I do is I put in place of X, I put X plus 1. I actually get something very nice like this, whereas all the coefficients are divisible by 2 and 4 doesn't divide 6. So I can apply Eisenstein criteria for F of X plus 1 and conclude that F of X plus 1 is irreducible. So F of X. I hope it is clear till now. Okay. Now I actually need a little bit of valuation. So I just introduce the definition of discrete valuations. So discrete valuation is a function from K to Z union infinity, satisfying V of A is infinity if and only if A is 0. Okay, I take V of 0 to be infinity, and then I also insist V of AB should be V of A plus V of B. Okay, and you will understand why I have some such a conditions. Okay, when you see the example, maybe, and V of A plus B is greater than or equal to minimum of V of A, V of B for all AB belongs to K. where k I've taken to be the field. So for example, I can take let n be any integer. Then this is called periodic integer, periodic valuation, which I define it over q. But to define it over q, first I'll define over z. So what I do is let n be integer. Then n can by unique factorization I can write n is equal to p power k into n, where p doesn't divide n. So then I define Vp of n to be equal to k. And then you take any rational number, we know that it is uniquely represented by r by s. So then I'll define Vp of x to be equal to Vp of x, Vp of r minus Vp of s. Vp of r by s is equal to this. So, okay, then, yeah, absolute value. So if I have a discrete valuation, I can always define absolute value. But what is absolute value is it's like mostly you would have seen norm. I think maybe it similar to norm. Now absolute value of a is 0 if and only if a is 0. Absolute value of a into b is it's a product of absolute value of a and absolute value of b, and the absolute value of a plus b is less than or equal to absolute value of a plus absolute value of b. Okay. So if you can whatever the conditions I had on discrete valuation new, if I define the absolute value of a to be equal to e power new a, you can actually check, very easily check that all these properties will be satisfied by this function mod a. Okay, Sarnika, is there any reason for defining it as an absolute exponent? Yes, actually, I want to define I want to satisfy all these properties, so I can define something out of it later. Like I want to satisfy properties like norm, so I have to take exponential. I can even replace e by any other number, any natural number, any real number. That would not make much difference. But just for convention, I will take e. Usually, some people take in periodic valuation they take e to be p actually, but that's okay. Okay. So once I have this absolute value to satisfy all these properties, see, whenever you have norm, the next thing you do is you try to define a metric using the norm. So since I have some function which is similar to norm, I will also try to define a metric using this. So the metric is the very obvious way of defining it. So once you have an absolute value, the distance between 2 points I'll define to be the absolute value of a minus b. And in case if there are any first and second years who is missing, I really don't worry about the discrete valuations. So anyway, I'll try to make it clear the Newton polygon. Though you really don't understand, I can tell you how to apply and such things, how to see the irreducibility. But if you understand this part, you will understand the proof and such things. Otherwise, you will just understand the method. That's okay, fine. You see, once you have a metric space, it's an obvious thing to talk about is it complete or not. So similarly, here I have a discrete valuation field. So is it complete or not? So when do I say it is complete? So if we have defined a metric, so if it is complete with that metric, we say it is complete. Otherwise, as we do in a metric space case, we can always complete our metric space. Here also, I complete my I complete my discrete valuation thing. I get the complete. So actually, thing is, whatever the periodic valuation I defined on Q, I can show it is naturally not complete, because if I take summation summation I running from 1 to infinity, summation I running from 1 to n p power I. So if I take this sequence, this is actually convergent. It is going to be Cauchy with respect to periodic valuation, but it is not convergent. I mean, it is not convergent in the periodic valuation. It takes some time. I mean, not lot of time, but I can't accommodate here. But you can show that the periodic valuation is not complete in Q. So what I do is I will complete it. I call that field as a QP. So this is a very well-known field, and this a lot of research is going on this periodic valuation, periodic completions. They use some, they do anyway, and this actually comes out to be fractional field of inverse limit of this thing. So maybe people who know inverse limit, they might, this is called periodic integers. This z mod p power n z. This is called periodic integers, and that actually QP happens to be the fractional field of that. So now, having all set the notations, maybe I'll define what Newton polygon is. Okay. So given a polynomial over Q, so again, caution, what I'm saying, you can actually define it in general, but I'm only talking over Q. So yeah, so let f of x be a polynomial that belongs to Q with both constant term and the leading term are non-zero. Then periodic Newton polygon of f of x is denoted by 10p of f, which is defined to be lower convex hull of set of points where I consider 0, the periodic valuation of a0, 1, periodic valuation of a1, and so on, 9, periodic valuation of an. So this is a set. I consider convex hull of this, and then I take a lower convex hull of that. So actually, though Newton, I call it a Newton polygon, which is some kind of misleading. It's like tempting to consider, okay, it will be closed figure, but it's not. It is just a sequence of line segments whose slopes will be increasing. Maybe I will show you some 2 examples. You'll see. So for example, I take f of x to be equal to 25 x power 8 and 2 x power 7 minus 3 x cube plus 15 x square plus 45. So then, as I had this set of points SP of f, I should consider SP of f. SP of f, I consider I have this point. And one more question is that this 1, infinity, wherever that infinity is there, they actually lies above, right? So we we'll leave those terms. Other terms we'll see in the point. And now, if you consider the convex hull, this will be the lower part of it. Okay, these lines, whatever I have drawn, this will be the lower part of it, and this is called actually the Newton polygon. The Newton polygon containing these three line segments. The time I am considering here is a 5. I think. I hope it is clear. Yes. P I have taken to be 5. So 0, V of a0, that is 45. 45, write it as 3 square into 5. So there is only 1 power of 5. And for 25, I have 5 square, which is 2 here. I hope now it is clear. The prime is 2. And then, so I can actually consider this 2, 1 into my thing, because if I go there, my convexity will be lost. And next example, I consider 9x power 8 plus 2 x power 7 minus 1 by 9 x cube plus 15 x square plus 3x plus 45. So P is equal to 3, and SP, I have taken P to be 3 here. And now if I consider the set of SPFF, that will be 0, 2, you can see, and 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, minus 2. And that is easy to see. So now, if you see the diagram, the Newton polygon, it looks like this. So here again, I can't accommodate one more point here, that it comes to be, I think, 2, 1 or something like that. I hope this is clear that this need not be a polygon, and this is just a set of all straight lines.
Yeah, Bhaiya.
Yeah, please.
So lower convex hull is basically maximal convex hull below this these points.
I mean, you draw the convex hull to take the lower part, whatever is the set of all what is it, straight lines that you will not the line segments.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the main theorem and the Newton polygon, which we should understand to understand the irreducibility. What here we say is, if you consider a polynomial for Q of x, which is not divisible by x, okay, then you have a see here. What I need to consider again points is, because though you have a lot of points here, but if I'm looking at the vertices of Newton polygon, I'll only say 0, 2 here, this one, and 1, 1, and 3, -2, and 7, 0, and 8, 2. These are the only, I call it as vertices of Newton polygon. I think I should have mentioned this. Okay. So let's say I have x0, y0, x1, y1, and xr, yrb, my vertices of Newton polygon. Okay. So then anyway we know how to calculate the slopes and all, but the main thing here is, see, you have, in case if you have a r plus 1 vertices, then there exists r polynomial over qp such that your f of x will be equal to product of all those r polynomials. And also something more we know about that r polynomials is that each polynomial will have a degree xi minus xi minus 1, and the roots of those polynomials will have a periodic valuation to be mi. If the slope is minus mi, then those roots will have a periodic valuation to be mi. This is something I will be proving it little later. Maybe I will be giving a sketch just to for the sake of completeness. I will not be proving mostly. It will be complete proof thing, but we'll use this to determine the irreducibility of the polynomials. Okay. I hope this is clear. That once again I repeat. So once you have a polynomial over q of x, okay, find out the Newton, like you first write the SP of f. Okay, that is the first thing, and then draw the Newton polygon, find out the vertices. So now if you have a r plus 1 vertices, then there exists a r polynomial over qp, okay, such that f of x is the product of all those polynomials. So now you remember in the starting I said if I have k contained in L as a field extension, if f is irreducible over L, then f is irreducible over k. I hope you understand where I am actually heading to. So now I have a q contained in qp. Okay. So I take a polynomial over q. I go to qp. In case if f is irreducible over qp, that has to be irreducible over q. But I know how to. I have something very ready-made thing. How does the factorization in qp looks like? Just by looking at the number of vertices at number of vertices of Newton polygon, I can see whether f is factored into more than two polygons or not. Sorry, more than two polynomials or not. That I can say, right? So if suppose let's say my vertices are just 2. So then over qp, how does my f look like? It is just going to be one thing, right? So that means it is highly possible that is irreducible one. Okay. So that is what I wanted to make use of, and then let's see. Next theorem, I think we should. Yeah, this is one lemma that I am going to use it next time. What says is, so I actually there we have seen that you had a q with a periodic valuation, and then we completed to qp. Actually, one more thing is that we can actually also extend this valuation to qp using simple limit. We just write a limit using the limit property of Cauchy sequences. We can extend it, and actually when you take an image of nu of k, that actually happens to be 1 by E z, where E is a some integer which is less than n, but actually E happens to be ramification index of k over qp. If you know what ramification index is, it's okay. Otherwise, do not worry. It's just some integer which is less than n that you understand. That's all what we need. This also I will not be giving a proof here. Okay. Then look, one corollary. Nice thing to this is the corollary of the main theorem of Newton polygons. If f is a monic polynomial of degree n for qp, suppose Newton polygon consists of single line segment of slope minus a by n, where a is relatively prime to n, then f is irreducible in qp of x. See, as I was saying, so if you have only one single segment, or even when you go to qp, there will be only one factor that you will actually find. Okay, but but one more condition is that if that line segment has a slope minus a by n, where a is relatively prime to n, then f happens to be irreducible in qp of x. But we have seen if it is irreducible over QP of x, it should be irreducible over Q of x as well because of Q contained in QP. I hope it is clear now. Then let's get to proof. So okay, now first thing I do is let me use the main theorem of Newton polygons, which says that once you have a slope, then there exists a root whose valuation will be minus of the slope. But I had a slope of minus a by n, so there exists a root alpha of f such that nu of alpha is actually equal to a by n. Okay. Next thing. So k is equal to, let's consider k to be QP of alpha, and then k over QP, let's say, and since we know that alpha is the root of f, and degree of f we are considered to be n, so anyway the degree of QP of alpha should be less than or equal to n. That that's from Galois theory. Okay. So by above lemma, there exists a E less than or equal to R, such that the periodic valuation of k is equal to 1 by E into Z. That is what I assumed in the just before after the theorem I showed you here. I have assumed this lemma. By this, I have that V of k is equal to 1 by E into Z. But I know that V of alpha is a by n. So a by n should belong to 1 by E into Z, right? That means n divides E, is it not? So, but I know that E should be E is actually less than R, but R is less than or equal to n, which means E is equal to n and n is equal to R. So by that what I have is k over QP is equal to n. Okay, but so just one more lemma that I want to use, which is I think many people who have done Galois theory would know it. The trivial one. In case you want a proof of this, at the end of the talk you can ask me, I'll provide. So if f is a polynomial over q of x, alpha be the root of f. Okay, I should not have written q of x, it's k of x, let's write. So then k of x over k is equal to degree of f if and only if f is a irreducible polynomial over k. Okay. So now I have actually shown, what I have shown is k over qp is actually equal to n, I have shown, which is the degree of f. That means f has to be irreducible. So now if I start with f, so here though I started if I start a polynomial f from q which lies over q, then I can consider it's a polynomial over qp and I can do all this. But only thing I have to make sure is that Newton polygon should contain a single line segment. That's all what I have to make sure. Okay. So before proving the Eisenstein criteria, I want to make a note, the remark. Suppose I have a polynomial over q and NP of f has one edge satisfying the above corollary. That means the edge has a slope a by n, where a is relatively prime to n. So then by the above corollary I can prove that f of x has to be irreducible. And also, even if I consider dA to be plus or minus ai, and this g of x, if I consider summation j running from 0 to n, bj of x, bj into x power j. So one thing easy to observe is that the signs of the coefficient will not affect my Newton polygon. The Newton polygon stays the same. Okay, so even then this g of x is going to be irreducible. So now we give the famous Eisenstein criteria proof using the Newton polygon. Though it is not a very good way of giving, but I thought it will be easy to see. I think I have described the method, and we can if I can show that is a bigger umbrella, that would be good. So I thought I will give a proof. Okay. So we assume f is a monic polynomial. We can assume that f is a monic polynomial because taking out the leading coefficient, and we know that however f is irreducible if and only if after taking out leading coefficient, whatever is left is going to be irreducible. Other way I can say f is reducible only if that after taking out leading coefficient, that is going to be reducible. Anyway, we can assume it is a monic polynomial. So if f be monic polynomial, a positive degree over z, satisfying condition in Eisenstein criteria. What do I have in Eisenstein criteria? I have that P divides all the coefficients and P square doesn't divide A naught. Sorry for the interruption. Just want to show one diagram. Yeah. So if I have a polynomial like this, and the Eisenstein criteria, what I have is, so P divides AI for all I 0 less than or equal to I less than or equal to n, and P square doesn't divide A naught. And yeah, this is the conditions I have, right? So now let's look at what is this ST of F. This point will be, this will be 0, 1, okay, and 1, V of A1, where this V of A1 will be more than 1. Similarly, till n minus 1, V of A1, they are more than 1. Okay, V a n minus 1. And the last one will be n, 0.
There's a comment. Okay, so one is from VG who says, I think you should avoid the leading coefficient.
Yes, I've taken. Yes, I have removed the leading coefficient, and then
one more comment from Shanmugapriya Anbasam who says P should not divide AN, right?
AN is actually 1 here. Oh, yeah. Okay, I wrote. Okay, thank you. So having this, now I have my SPFF to be this. But if I draw this, let's look at this. So I have my first 0, 1 comes here. Okay, the thing, and my n, 0 comes somewhere here. And let me draw a straight line here. Actually, it is easy to observe that all these points, 1, VA1 and 2, VA2, as there, 1, 1 comes somewhere here, and 2, 1 comes here, but this 2, VA2 should be above this, and 1, VA1 should be above this. All these points actually lies above this line. So the lower convex hull happens to be this line, the line alone. And slope of this, if I calculate, that happens to be 0 minus 1 by n minus 0. This is minus 1 by n. And exactly as I had 0 minus a by n, and a, n is, I want it to be co-prime. So I believe exactly I have here, so exactly the same thing. So now what I have is I showed that whenever the polynomial P satisfies the Eisenstein criteria, it has only one edge. Newton polygon of that polynomial has one edge, and slope happens to be minus 1 by n. Okay. So as using the previous corollary that I proved, F is irreducible. Okay. Hope it is clear. So I have proved the Eisenstein criteria. So now, for the completeness, if I can give the proof, if I just give the sketch of a proof of the main theorem of Newton polygon, that will be. So here also, I think there is some, again, I think you should excuse me for being too sketchy here. So see what I do. Okay, let me again recall the Newton polygon, the main theorem of Newton polygon. It says, suppose f of x belongs to q of x is not divisible by x. That means I am considering the same, when I defined the Newton polygon, I had two conditions, which is an into a naught is not 0. That is exactly this. And I have an R vertices with this and R edges with the slopes minus mi. Then there exists Newton polygons. Sorry, there exists R polynomials over QP such that F is the product of all these polynomials, and each degree is given by this, and each polynomial has the roots whose periodic valuation is mi. So see, the last statement says, for I is equal to 1, I is equal to any I, the Fi has a periodic the roots whose periodic valuation is mi. So I will start with this point. So I want to cache on this point. What I do is, let's take the roots of F to be alpha 1, alpha n. I'll rearrange them in such a way that I'll have something like this, like V of A alpha 1 is equal to V of alpha. First, some S1 will have a valuation to be M1. Then next S2 will have a S1 minus S2 will have valuation M2, like that. So now, so if you assume use it, but I know something about coefficients, I can always write the coefficients as a symmetric functions of roots. And also, something I should have told before, that though I already mentioned in defining the periodic valuation, that if I have the first coefficient a n minus 1, if I write, that will be actually sum of all roots, right? Of f. Sum of all roots means it will be sum alpha 1, alpha 2 plus alpha n. But if I take that valuation of that is actually greater than or equal to the minimum of each of them. That is a definition of the periodic valuation. But something nice thing happens is when if you are considering a valuation of x plus y, but you know that x has a minimum valuation and y doesn't have a y's valuation is strictly bigger than x, then you can actually say that the valuation of x plus y happens to minimum. For example, let's consider p square and p. Okay, valuation of p square with respect to p is going to be 2, whereas valuation of p is going to be 1. Now add them, p square plus p. The valuation of p square plus p will happen to be 1, which is actually minimum of valuation of p comma p square. I hope this is clear. So but when you look at the valuation of a n minus s1, this happens to be a minimum of, first thing to notice, a n minus s1 will be sum of s1 products of roots. And there is only one, since we have assumed m1 is strictly less than, m2 is strictly less than mp plus 1, in this collection, there is only one thing, that is actually alpha s1, alpha s2, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha s1, this product, which will have a minimum valuation. Every other thing will have more than that. The valuation of those things will be more than that. So that is the reason why this v of a n minus s1 will be actually equal to s1 m1. Similarly, if you go on, we can consider, okay, this is a typo. That should be new. I just wrote nu. That's okay. Some mistake. But similarly, we consider. But when it comes to a n minus s2, here again, so we have one element which have a minimal valuation. So we'll have this to be equal to s1 m1 plus s2 minus s1 into m2. So similarly, we can show that the valuation of a n minus sk is equal to s1 m1 plus s2 minus s1 into m2, and so on, sk minus 1 into m2. Do not worry about this proof. This fairly simple. You just have to work it out. Actually, the vertices has to be will come out to be something like this. Okay, exactly those n coefficients, that a n minus 2 coefficients. Actually, you can actually see that you construct a line between those two, and any point in between that actually lies above that. That is easy to that is because we have this nu of a n minus s1 minus 2 is greater than or equal to these things. You can actually see that is when you substitute this point in there, that actually lies, that comes out to be positive, which means that lies above. That is easy to check. So in case if any problem, I think we can discuss in the once talk is over. So having this, it is also easy to compute that you will later on we will have those are the vertices, and compute the slope. Slope comes out to be something like this, which we wanted. And since that's, and degree is also easy to see, because f1 is a product of s1 into s1 vertices, like product of s1 roots, right? So f1 will have a degree s1, which is actually the difference between first x coordinates of 2 points there. You can see s1 will be the difference between these 2 points, right? Which is actually the product of this alpha 1, alpha 2, x minus alpha 1, x minus alpha 2, or x minus alpha s1. Hopefully this is, I understand that it's not very clear, but I hope you understand the idea. Then the Cohen's criteria. So see, we have talking about something irreducibility criteria, and again I present here the Cohen's one, which is comparatively not easy, I say, but yeah, it's more I would say efficient in the sense. See, if you have a polynomial, it is just enough to find a prime such that whose the base 10 expansion happens to be similar to the polynomial. That is enough to find so that you can conclude that f is actually irreducible. Okay, let me just state properly. Let p be the polynomial, p be the prime number, and suppose the expression of p in base 10 is p a m x p 10 power n plus a m minus 1 p power 10 power m minus 1, and so on, a1 10 plus a naught. So if this is a base 10 expansion, then consider the polynomial f of x is equal to am x power m plus am minus 1 x power m minus 1, and so on, a1x plus a naught. So this is just, I have just simply replaced 10 by x. Then it happens that this f of x actually happens to be irreducible in Z of x. Yes, Aditya is asking, can I take any base? Yes. So this was a observation by Cohen, and later on, Filasta and with including some other people, I don't remember the names, but they have extended to any base. So now the question is, okay, now it's like what we are saying is, it just we are expanding it base some number, and then saying, okay, it is irreducible or not. But if I take any polynomial, suppose let's say it represents prime number. That means what? There exists an n such that f of n is a prime. So is it necessary that f has to be irreducible? Okay, I would certainly get answers from you if I ask that. Okay, no, because you would simply take x. Suppose say 5 is a prime. I would take x minus 3 into x plus 1. If I take x is equal to 4, then I will get 5. But the polynomial that I gave is not irreducible. So now, but I can do one thing, that I can keep other condition on my coefficients, or that number that I whatever I have, f of n, which is a prime. I have some condition on this n based on my polynomial. Okay, if that n is sufficiently large, then I can say this is irreducible. That is exactly was given by Ramurthy. He is actually his criterion actually says that if p of x is irreducible, if it takes a prime value at an integer which is sufficiently far from the coefficients of polynomial, which is stated as. So this was published in American Math Monthly in 2002, where it says that a polynomial f of x is equal to am x power n plus am minus 1 x power n minus 1, and so on, a1x plus a naught is a polynomial of degree m z of x, and that h be the integer which is a maximum of a by am, where I running from 1 to m minus 1. And if f of n becomes a prime for some integer where n happens to be greater than h plus 2, then f of x is irreducible. So this is really nice. It's just that you are just knowing that it represents one prime, and you are able to conclude that it's irreducible. So having talked about all this, I feel it's very relevant to talk about a few questions which are really interesting. First thing is, okay, suppose I take an irreducible polynomial. So I know that if I take a polynomial which represents a prime which is sufficiently at an integer which is sufficiently large, then I know that it is irreducible. But conversely, not necessarily converse, but if I take a irreducible polynomial, is it necessary that it should represent some prime? Not, as of now, I don't have an answer for this. But I'm also not sure whether it is open. It may be answered or something. But with this, there is one famous open problem, which is a conjecture, which says that if f is a irreducible polynomial, then the polynomial f of x represents infinitely many prime numbers. So this is a conjecture. So if this is a conjecture, I think maybe the answer for that question may be known. I think I'm not sure. I can't make any conclusion with the question. But this conjecture is till now it is not proved. So but many of you would know that whereas if f is a linear polynomial, then we know the answer for that, and that is Dirichlet theorem and arithmetic progression. Okay, every arithmetic progression has infinitely many primes. So maybe some people who have done Galois theory would know this, or algebraic number theory they would know, or at least people would know the statement, may not be the proof at least. Okay. For a degree greater than or equal to 2, it is still unknown. So you are always welcome to try. The converse of this conjecture is pretty easy, because suppose if I have a polynomial which represents infinitely many primes, let's say, that means let's say, suppose the conclusion is not, I mean, if it represents infinitely many primes, and if f is not irreducible, suppose it is reducible. That means I can write f is equal to g into h. But I know that it represents infinitely many primes, right? So let's say that means the set f1, f of 1, f of 2, and so on, f of n. This set has infinitely many primes. Okay, let me consider those integers where f of n is going to be prime. So then f of n is equal to g of n into h of n. But I know this is prime, I know, so one of g of n or h of n has to be 1. And I know that any of these polynomials cannot take 1 infinitely many times. So this should be, no, we should have a contradiction here. So because any of the polynomial cannot take infinitely many infinitely many times, it can't take 1. These are the papers that I was talking. Maybe if possible, one of you can look up the proof, or maybe given a chance, maybe hopefully in future I'll try to present this proof of the Ramouti's conjecture. Ramouti's criteria of irreducibility. And this is a book where I got this Newton polygon method, which is available in even some other algebraic number theory books as well. Yes, I think Maths Club has shared a link as well. Maybe you can check it there. I thank my advisor, and thank you all for patient listening. Hope the walk through polygons irreducibility was not too long. Thank you.
Thanks for the talk again. I guess if there are any more questions, people can put them in the chat, or they can unmute and tell.
I have a question. When we talk about irreducibility of polynomials, we generally look at integers and rationals. Like most of these criteria are for that, right? Can we look at finite fields too?
No, in case of finite fields, it's pretty easy in the sense you will actually know how many irreducible polynomials are there of each degree. I think I don't remember this can be exact formula, but this can be given in terms of using the arithmetic function mu and I think mu and phi, something like using these two functions, you can give a formula, explicit formula, number of irreducible polynomials of particular degree. That means you can actually write down complete whole. I think there is also one algorithm. Once Vijay sir was mentioning, there is some algorithm by which you can actually write down all irreducible polynomials of particular degree. So this becomes easy when you next. It's like for suppose if I'm looking, I have in my hand all irreducible polynomials of degree, say 3 or less than 3, and you give me a polynomial of degree 4. I can easily check out whether it is reducible, because if it is reducible, it should be product of polynomial whose degree is less than or equal to 3, and they're irreducible. If this, whatever the list I have, it's enough to check that these are not the divisors of that polynomial. Okay, Savnik makes some comment. I don't know. No. I don't say it is an open problem or interest. No, that was natural for me to think. Okay, if I take any irreducible polynomial, is it necessary that it should represent one prime at least? I just thought, but I did not get an answer, so I thought I'll just share it with you. It's just fun thinking. Sure.
If you don't have any other questions, please unmute yourself so that we can thank the speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. So I would like to thank all volunteers for their energetic effort for running this club without any support from faculty group. They had run last 2 years. I was very happy their active involvement in arranging all the events and website and blogs, and it was something like really something going on with the students. I was so happy. And I would like to thank all the volunteers, Sagnik, Kalin Krishna, Ananda Krishna, Anand Chavan, Chaitanya, Tony, Join Tanudas, and all these volunteers. And special thanks to Sagnik for putting wonderful effort for this symposium. There are so many other talks also lined up. More junior students should involve. These all are fourth year, fifth year, third year. So we want more juniors from first year, second year also, or maybe some of the IPHD and PhD. So we want more volunteers for running this group. Slowly we have started faculty talks and even conferences we are planning in future. You have any other things in your mind, you can always write to this mathclub@isar.tvm.ac.in. Okay, thank you so much for participating also, joining also. Without participants, these events are not successful. Thank you so much for your interest in participating this event. Thank you again for all the speakers. Yesterday's talk, faculty talks, and today's contributor talks. Thanks for the speakers also. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, ma'am. And thanks again to all participants and speakers who were there today and the previous day. If you would like to give any suggestions or comments towards the club, you can always do so. You can mail us. If there is nothing else, we will like to conclude this entire thing. Essentially, we always would like to thank everyone who had supported us from the department and the group of coordinators, as well as the students at the institute, as well as there were one external speaker too. So right now we are in the end of the symposium. Hope we will be able to do similar things in future. We will conclude now. Yes, thank you.